start. We are born again. Open your heart.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, I have another special guest. This is Jules. He has a very amazing story. I really hope that it will inspire a lot of people who need to hear some good news, who need to hear that no matter what you're going through, there is hope and you can find a way through, and it's worth sticking to what you are doing and adjusting if you need to, but trust the process and amazing things can happen. So Jules, thank you so much for coming onto my channel and for sharing your story with everyone. I think it's going to be so amazing.
Of course, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So can you do me a favor? Just start from the beginning and take us through your journey, and then we'll talk about where you are now.
Okay, so my story kind of started when I was young. From the age I was born to about the age of 6, I grew up with my grandparents because, actually till the age of 4, because my mother stayed home in the beginning. But after that, I grew up a lot. I spent a lot of time in my grandparents' house, and my grandmother on my father's side was from the South, and my grandfather was from Wisconsin, and so they ate a lot of meat. And I was very happy to go from breast milk that I had with my mom to eating lots of sausage and hamburgers and things like that. So, that's kind of where I was really, really healthy. Everyone said, "Oh, he's such a skinny boy," but at the end of the day, I was thriving. I was happy. I was, all the time. I loved, they called me, my family, and I had some vegetarians in my family at the time, and they called me the sausage-o vegetarian because all I ate was sausage. And so things were great. And then, as life happens, my parents moved. And so I ended up moving with them from Los Angeles to San Diego, which is beautiful. I love it here. But at the same time, I no longer had access to my grandparents every day and eating the food that my grandmother would cook and having that whole, that whole experience. So my parents were very much in different camp from my grandmother and grandfather. And they were, they had read a lot of articles and literature about what was healthy to eat. And so they ended up putting me on a extremely low fat, high carb diet. And that was horrible. I absolutely hated it. I remember just the first time I tried turkey bacon, and I thought it was like, the worst thing in the world. And the color was horrible and the taste was terrible, but that's all my parents would buy were all these these foods that were, not really good, not really healthy. And I ended up eating lots of pasta, a lot of potatoes with it's better than butter, sprinkles on it, and margarine, and all these terrible things. And at that time, my parents had gained a lot of weight, and that's one of the reasons why they wanted to go low fat. I wasn't. I was, very thin and healthy, but they were. So they were, I ate what they ate. And it was, it was really terrible because I went from this, wonderful, healthy, saturated fat meat diet to like the most hardcore low fat diet you can imagine, with all these, just nothing but carbs. And of course I gained weight, and I became very, very chubby. Look at my pictures. When I was 7, I was this happy thin boy, and by 8 I was extremely chubby and just kind of inflamed all over. And that continued for a long time. My parents really continued with that diet and eating this way, and I just, I couldn't really escape. That's all I had. So it was a lot of rice and brown rice on top of it, which I hated. and vegetables with like little to no meat, very lean meat, if anything. So, when I finally got free a little bit, I went to high school and I was able to eat on my own and choose my own lunch for the first time in a long time, because I went to a private school when I was younger. And there I had access to hamburgers. And, I ate hamburgers like every day. And I really, really, really loved it. But then they also had a lot of the other junk, like cookies and, tons. And on the hamburgers, we always put tons of barbecue sauce and ketchup to make it palatable, because they weren't very good. And so in the beginning, I loved it. Then I really didn't feel good. I really started to feel sick. And by my second year, I was just like not enjoying it at all. And I was still, at my freshman year, I was still very heavy, coming from, the diet I had been on before. And so that's when I started just starving myself. It happened, I was feeling so uncomfortable. I hated how I felt after eating, and I hated all the weight I had. So I just started to stop eating. I would take my lunch money and pocket it and save it, and I would just not eat lunch. And I felt so much better. Like not eating that crap, one meal a day made me feel better. And then I would start skipping breakfast. And that also made me feel better, because I wasn't eating all the rice cakes and all the other stuff that, I had at home. And I felt great. But of course, I wasn't eating enough on the evening I would eat. And I definitely wasn't eating, meat or high fat. And I started to binge, because I was just starving. This is how, it happens with a lot of people that suffer from anorexia, is you become bulimic, because you start to binge on the food. You're so hungry. You feel so good when you're not eating. Then you have to eat, because it's driving you crazy. So you shove as much food in your mouth as you can, and then you feel terrible. So then I would purge. I would throw up. And I did that a lot. And I read about it. I looked up some stuff about bulimia at the time. And I remember reading, well, watch out when you're purging, because you could lose your teeth, because the acid and from your stomach. And I was conscious of this, but I just remember thinking, but I don't care. Like, I feel so much better when I'm not eating this food that everyone's telling me I need to eat, all the vegetables, all these things that are healthy. And I keep just, it's just feeling terrible. So that continued for a while, all throughout high school, until my junior year, when I just got really, really sick. And at this point, I was getting very, very emotionally unstable. I would say I would start having mood swings. I would be up or down. I would be king of the world one day and just feel like a complete and utter failure the next. And that was happening on these, without reason, without something happening. And I still was able to maintain my grades. I was second in my class in my junior year when I finished. But during my junior year, I also lost a close family member. And that really hit me more than anything else in my life before. And I ended up really just kind of shutting down. And I went to see a psychiatrist to talk about it. And they ended up having me stop school for a month to take a break, a mental health break. And so I did. And then I went back to school, but it wasn't the same as before. I really wasn't enjoying it. My grades were still really good, but I wasn't happy anymore. And by the end, I decided to drop out. I was just so fed up with how I felt. And I started to think that, what's the point of school? I wasn't learning anything. And just like all these really fast, rapid thoughts, started, going through my brain about my situation, about life. And so I dropped out. After my junior year, I dropped out. I took my GED. And for a year, I didn't go to school. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But I could say I was a little happier. I wasn't, I was, since I was at home, I wasn't able to binge and purge like I used to at school, because there was always someone around. So that lessened a bit, and not having the stress of school also helped to reduce my symptoms. So then I after that I went to college, started taking classes, but again I started to see this. I had this cycle of, I would start something, do really, really well, be like all in, have all this energy. And then as soon as like a few months or 4 or 5 months later, I would see a drop off. Like I couldn't write or think anymore. My brain would like shut down. And in college, I was physically, I was a lot healthier. I was going to the gym at my local college, and I was eating on my own again, and I was choosing what I thought was better food. I was eating a lot of salads and with a little bit of protein, and my favorite would be like a Cobb salad. Those were absolutely my favorites at the time, but it wasn't much. I really wasn't eating that much, and I would have that same thing where I would be up and I would be down. I would be up and I'd be down, and so I got a chance to go study in France, and I had this opportunity to, go someplace new, and I took it. I bought a one-way ticket to France. I had no plans on really coming back. I was like one course away from finishing my associate's degree, and I said, "Screw it! I need to go. I need to change." And so I went, and I was teaching in France for a while, and again, I felt better when I was in France. I love the food. I mean, everything was bacon and cream and cheese, and that was like the base of every meal you would eat there. So I was just really happy with the food. I was in love with the food. It just felt great. So I decided to stay. After my year of teaching, I enrolled in the university there. I got my degree in French language and culture. I was the fastest one in the program to go from beginner to advanced in 1 year, where normally that takes 3 years. So the school was very happy that I went there, and were very impressed. And with that accomplishment, I was able to enroll in a master's program at Sciences Po, which is the top political science schools in the world. And there I was, again, it was this, I was so excited because, first off, I didn't have to pay for college. It was free. It was paid for by the French government. And secondly, I love France. I love being there. I love the culture. I love the people. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, is French. And so it was just a great experience. And so I'm in this master's program at Sciences Po. I'm doing really well. I'm acing my finals, which in France is like no one gets above an 18. They do a 1 to 20 system there, and no one gets above an 18 on their finals in the university. Statistically, they can't give that out. And I got a 19 on one of my midterms. And so I was like super excited. But then again, I had this major stress in my life, in my personal life, related to school, and my brain just shut down. And so after acing the first half of my midterms, I completely failed the other half because I couldn't write my name. Like I couldn't write one sentence. And this was going from, I would wake up at 6, I would go to the library, I would spend all day at school, take classes. When I wasn't in school, I'd go to the library and reading. I was spending like, all day on campus, just studying, because I love learning. I love everything I was learning about sociology and about, politics and all these, and law, and all these things mixed together. And it was just a really exciting time. But my brain just stopped working. And at this point I said, okay, I need to figure this out. I don't know what's going on. I don't know, what's causing this. I need to go see my doctor. So I went to my doctor and I explained kind of what I was talking about. And she said, well, I don't know, but it's definitely sounds serious. Here's a psychiatrist you could go see. So I went to see a psychiatrist, and this was like a Freudian psychiatrist, like the chair, the lounge chair, and he's sitting back, and it just did not work at all. I felt terrible. Like the guy was just not asking questions, just letting me talk. What the hell am I supposed to talk about, right? So I left that guy, and I was, really desperate at the time. So I contacted one of my friends who I knew had been seeing someone, and they suggested a psychologist that they were seeing. So I called a psychologist, and I went, and it was much better. There was no lounge chairs, there was no laying down. We were sitting in 2 chairs talking to each other. And after a few sessions, she said, "It sounds like you are bipolar." And I went, "What? Like, what's bipolar?" And she said, "Well, it's a mood disorder, and it means you can't control your moods. Your brain chemistry is off, and that's why you have this cycle of super energy where you're super performing and you can do anything, and then complete failure." And it was like, I read about that when she said that, and she gave me a book to read by Dr. Kay Redfield Jameson about living with bipolar and what it was like for her experience. And that was me. That her story resonated so much with me, because that was my life up until this point. Like all the things I couldn't explain, all the moods and the highs and the lows that were just unexplainable. It was all based on the fact that I had this condition. And she said, "Well, the bad news is you're probably going to want to stop, not go to college anymore, especially at a really strenuous master's degree, because the suicide rate for people who are bipolar in a master's degree is very high." And I said, that makes sense, because I definitely wanted to kill myself when I couldn't even perform and couldn't even write any of my midterms after I stopped. I knew this was a great opportunity. I had all these people supporting me, but I just couldn't do it. And so I dropped out on my master's program. And I was really depressed for a long time, really sad. And then with my psychologist's help, she got me with a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist said, "Oh yeah, that's textbook bipolar. Here's a drug, take it, and you're going to feel better." So I took Zoloft, antidepressant. I felt weird. I didn't feel better, but I definitely felt weird. It was like I was so detached from everything going on around me. Like I couldn't feel emotions. I was just like feeling good, but with absolutely zero reason. And if something bad happened, I wouldn't feel it. And I'm like, this is not great. Like, I don't like this feeling of being so detached and just kind of like in this bubble, emotional bubble. And so he said, "Well, for bipolar, we'll give you a mood stabilizer." And I loved how he explained. He said, a mood stabilizer, what it does is you have your highs and your lows, and it just keeps you within this range. And I said, "Well, that sounds great. Let me try that." So I started to take Depakote, and it was horrible. Like we have in the bipolar community, we have a mood scale of like 1 to 10, 10 being super manic and horrible, delusional, you think you're God, and 1 being you're going to kill yourself really soon. I was never above a 5. That whole time I took Depakote, I was just constantly depressed. I couldn't perform at work. Like I started working as a teacher again because I was qualified for that, but I just couldn't concentrate some days, and others I was just always sad. And then on top of that, I started to gain 5 pounds a month. So I go from 175 when I was, in college to 180 the next month, 185 next month, and with someone with an eating disorder and like body dysmorphia, this was like really, really bad. Like this was just, not how someone should feel. I gained all this weight, and this really led to more anorexia because I felt terrible. I couldn't work out because I was too depressed, and I just kept gaining weight. And I was eating the exact same thing my girlfriend was eating, but she was thin, and I just kept ballooning up. And I go to my psychiatrist, say, doctor, seriously, this is not good for me. Like, I'm gaining a ton of weight. Is it, could it be the Depakote? And it's like, oh, no, none of my clients have that reaction. And of course, years later, I see a doctor in the States, and he goes, oh yeah, Depakote does that all the time. I was like, how could he be so incompetent to not know this, right? Not know a side effect that's listed on the drug that, you could gain weight. So, I now I feel horrible. I think it's me. I'm just thinking that, well, the universe hates me, because this is horrible. And I'm just getting worse. I'm getting worse and worse. And I was on Depakote for 3 years. And all up until I left. And I quit my job as a teacher in France and decided to move back home because I just wasn't functioning. I couldn't function. And now my wife, my girlfriend, who's now my wife, she was like, yeah, we need help. This is not working. And I thought, oh, well, maybe I can get better help in the United States. I didn't think so at the time, and I was right, but I did have my family. So that was important because I could go, I didn't have to support myself necessarily. I could live with them, with my wife, and that's what we did. So in 2011, we moved back to the United States. I moved in with my family, and that was hard. Like, I mean, they were my mother, and my father are wonderful people, but you're moving back in with your parents as an adult, that's what was just really tough. So I spent about a year, well, maybe, 2 years just doing nothing. I was just so depressed all the time. And after a while, I said, okay, I just got to get off this. I can't take the Depakote anymore. I just feel terrible. So I slowly tapered down my Depakote and eventually got off it because I knew if you drop your medications fast, you could be worse. And I did not want that. So I slowly tapered off and I was free. And then a year later, I started to feel a little better. And so I said, oh, well, this is great. I'm so happy I stopped the Depakote. Like, this is wonderful. I'm going to go back to work. And, at that time, my wife was pregnant. So with our first child. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to go back to work. I found a job as a teacher again. I was doing that. And when my wife was pregnant and we were very stressed. I was very worried about the future, very worried about our income, but that's what I did to deal with it. But I didn't know at the time, but I was having severe mood swings. I was in what we call hypomania, which I was very, very up when I started, because I started in the spring when the weather was nicer. And I was all over the place. Like, I was delusional. I would say anything. I could say anything to anyone, like emotional, reactionary, over aggressive, depressed, like all these emotions just swirling all the time. And it was just a mess. So I was able to keep that job for about 3 years. And then, but I was all over. I mean, there would be times in the winter, which is normally when I would be depressed naturally, where I would just be crying. I would be sitting in my car, in the parking lot of the school, just crying because I did not want to go. I didn't feel like I could go. And I would just have to stop crying, dry my eyes and just pretend like everything was fine and go teach. And then 2 years later, my wife got pregnant again with our second daughter. And at this time, it really set me off the deep end. And at this point, I wasn't taking any medications because I couldn't function with the medications, and I didn't have a good psychiatrist. They were so much more expensive here than in France, where you could see a psychiatrist 3 times a week, and it was covered by the, your taxes. But here I was like, I couldn't afford one. I had to go to the, public health psychiatry, and they were, they would prescribe you drugs, but you could only see them once a month in the beginning, and maybe once every 3 months. And if you needed an appointment, you would have to wait a month. And I knew, based on my prior experience with medications, that was super dangerous. If you didn't have access to a caregiver or a doctor and you have a problem with your meds, you could kill yourself. So I didn't have a psychiatrist, when I was working, and I was just all over the place, like bouncing up and down. It was terrible. And when my wife was pregnant with her second daughter, I quit my job before she was born. Again, that same feeling I had when I was in high school, when I left high school. Oh, this is bullshit. I'm going to be so much better, on my own. I'm going to be so much better, doing something else. I'm going to do these great things, blah, 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 blah. And my wife's like, that's insane. Like, you can't, our daughter's not even born yet. You can't quit. But I did. And of course, all my plans and all my, ideas I had that were going to make us money, none of it was real. It didn't work. And I ended up, just losing the only income we had. So that put an enormous stress on my wife, on my, after our daughter was born, because our second daughter was born, because we just felt terrible. And so that led to a severe depression again, because I came down from my manic state, and I just realized that, that was all in my head. None of it was real. Again, I was completely delusional. And I was so embarrassed and felt so much shame for doing that, saying that nonsense to my colleagues, that, I was this person that I never, in my right mind, never would have thought I was. And, I was just really lost. And then I found another job, and a teaching job. So I went to that, and it was really hard because I was still depressed, but I was doing cognitive behavioral therapy, which helped with the depression, helped me stand back, take a step back from what was going on and my thoughts, and kind of get a handle on it. And so I thought that was great. And I was reading this book by Dr. I think it's Dr. David Burns, Feeling Good, about CBT therapy. And I was using that myself, trying to learn from it. And then again, I got out of the depression, but I went super high manic again. And this one was worse than the last one in 2015. This was 2016. And it was horrible. I went out, working only part-time. I went out and bought like 3 cars. I maxed out all my credit cards. I rented an office space because I was convinced I was a CEO of this company, and quit my job. Oh no, actually I got fired because I was saying this nonsense to people, and they were like, that's what's going on. And in my manic state, I was like, oh no, of course you just don't understand. I'm this amazing person, blah, blah, blah. And it was just, they had to let me go. So I had a severance check from my company, so that I was fired. But I was still just so high in this mania, and just really, really sick. And eventually you come down from that. And I came down, and luckily I didn't kill myself. I came close, whether it was reckless driving at 3 a.m. or, getting into fights with strangers. Like, it was just really, really, really terrible. And so when I finally came down, I got back into depression. I went, oh my God, it happened again. This is it. Like, I was lucky to survive the last time. I can't do this anymore. I can't put myself out there without getting a handle on this. And I tried, at that point, I was on a ketogenic diet. So I'd lost a lot of weight. So physically I felt great, but emotionally I was completely a basket case. Like, my moods were all over the place, and the delusions were, coming and going. So, I said, well, screw that. I'm not going to be keto anymore. Like I've never had such horrible, delusions and mania as I was on keto. So I'm going to stop. So I did. I went from, again, 200 pounds, started gaining weight again, without taking any drugs. And I was happy that the food I was eating at the time after going keto, when I stopped being keto, was so like harmful, because it helped me stay depressed. And depressed was like this really fine line of, well, I'm going to be depressed, but at least I won't be manic. I would take depression any day of the week over mania, because mania, I would lose all sense of myself. I would lose all logic. I would just lose myself in the mania. So depression was like my goal. I said, I'm going to try to shoot for staying depressed as long as possible. So I stopped working. That put a terrible strain on my wife, as you can imagine, because she has now 2 kids, one who's 2, one who's just born, and we have 0 income. All the cars get repossessed. I lose everything. And all our credit cards are maxed out after just paying them back from my last, the job I just was fired from. But I couldn't. I just said, I'm gonna. If I go back to work, I'm gonna kill myself. Like there's no way I can do this. And so for the last 6 years, that's what I did. I didn't work. I stayed home. I would go out of my house maybe once a month. And at this time, I was suffering from terrible depression, terrible anxiety, without having any triggers like stress of work or going out. My mania was somewhat under control. I was still super aggressive and reactionary if someone said something wrong, but I was learning at home, learning ways to deal with it without, taking drugs, or without drinking, or without, alcohol. I would, if I felt like I was starting to get, manic or get triggered by something, I would just leave. I would go upstairs and leave everyone and leave the discussion, which happened a lot. But that was better than staying downstairs and getting into a yelling match with my wife or my parents. But I was just so sad. I mean, we spend so much of our life at work, and when that's taken away from you, what's left? So much of my identity was a teacher. And then when that was taken away from me and I couldn't be a teacher anymore, like I was just miserable. So I would spend all this time just, really, really depressed. And I said, okay, well, I had been seen as not a psychologist, a licensed clinical social worker when I lost my last job in 2016, when I was fired. And, she said, well, maybe you should just take drugs, take medications. And I was like, you don't understand. Like, I couldn't work anyway with the medications I was on. And I felt horrible. I had these horrible side effects, like all this weight that I never, I haven't had since college. And you want me to go back on the drugs? Like, no, I can't do it. So I left her because I just could not agree with that course of treatment. And I was just on my own for 6 years. And, a year ago, I finally decided to try another, clinical social worker, and to at least talk about what I was going through. And I finally found one who was really good. And that was they when you're in like when you're that poor, you can't pay for your own, therapist. You basically get whoever's available, and it was always changing. So finally I stumbled on this one therapist, Jordan, who really helped me to come to terms with my illness, terms with my, my limitations, that I was never going to recover, that I was never going to get better, but to be okay with that and to accept it. And so 6 years after being fired, I decided I came to accept that this was my life now, and it wasn't horrible. I got to spend the last 6 years with my kids every day. I got to see them grow up. even though I couldn't leave the house most of the time. I'd only leave the house like once a month with them, always with them, never on my own. I would never go anyplace on my own. I couldn't trust myself. But, I had a really great experience with that. And it brought me closer to my kids. And I got to be, for them, their daddy was just always home. And, that I learned to see that as a really positive thing, that I was able to contribute to their lives, even being completely mentally ill. I was still able to be there for them when they needed a hug, when they needed someone to talk to. And that was it. That was my life. And I accepted it. And I said, okay, I'll never work again, but at least, I can be there for my family. And I tried applying for Social Security disability, and that didn't work. I appealed with a judge and a lawyer, and that didn't work. The judge said, well, our psychiatrist says that you suffer from delusions, but you should still be able to work. And, I said, but the drugs, I'm still delusional on the drugs that I'm being prescribed. And how am I supposed to work with that? And no explanation, just, it's in our system, it's terrible because judges have absolutely zero understanding of psychiatric illness. And yet they're put in charge of deciding on people's fates when it comes to psychiatry. And it's just honestly criminal and should be, illegal, because the only person that should have any say on your health should be a psychiatrist, not the judge. And when the psychiatrist agreed that I was delusional, that I was unable to work because of my delusions, the judge overruled him without any reasoning. So, that's where I was. And I just was, I wasn't having any income. I couldn't support my family. I was completely reliant on my wife and my father and mother to support me and my family, because I couldn't. And my wife had been working the last 6 years, building up her business, but still not making, nearly as much money as I was making as a teacher. And we were living in poverty, essentially. And one day I'm in the morning, I always go to bed listening to a podcast. It helps me sleep, help calm my mind. And I heard this one podcast on the Low Carb MD podcast with Laura Spath. And she was interviewed with her husband, talking about, carnivore and how it changed their lives and how it helped them. And, I wasn't really interested in trying another diet or trying something new, because keto really didn't work for me. So I wasn't really excited. And then she mentioned that, well, and this one person, L. Amber O'Hearn, she was able to, cure her bipolar. And I went, what? And I swear I listened to that interview like 5 times, that same part again and again and again, to really try to understand what she was saying. Because this was the first time I had heard anyone talk about bipolar and nutrition. I'd heard people theorize about ketogenic diets and bipolar and mental disorders and mental illness, but I hadn't heard anyone with my, my case, my example of bipolar, with, if it didn't work on keto, there was no hope. So I said, well, okay. I mean, at this point I had accepted my illness. I knew I wasn't going to recover. So I said, well, what do I have to lose? And I really didn't want to live, honestly, anymore. So I wasn't really worried about eating high cholesterol or high fat or nothing but meat. So, my own physical safety wasn't a concern. And so I did it. I looked up as much as I could. I looked up, I read articles and watched videos by Sean Baker and Paul Saldino and Laura Spath's, on her channel. And I saw information by Judy Cho, and I said, okay, that's it. I'm doing this. I told my family, okay, I have literally nothing to lose, so we're going to go carnivore. And they said, I said, I'm going to go carnivore. I didn't impose on my family. They said, oh, okay, well, if you want, my wife didn't have really any hope at this point. So she said, whatever you want to do. And my father was like, okay, well, I'm going to stay keto because I like my weight on keto, but if you want to be carnivore, that's fine. So I tried carnivore. And the first time I cooked a bunch of steaks and sat down to, dinner with everyone else, and my father said, okay, I want to be carnivore now. It was like not even a second. He just saw what I was eating. They said, okay, I want that. So he decided to join me. So we were carnivore together, and my family stayed keto, even though I wasn't keto before going carnivore. My family stayed keto because they were healthy on it somewhat. And I just did, pretty much just ate a lot of roast, a lot of beef. I really like the taste of beef. Like, I always love steaks, but I learned to really like it. Like, my tongue, every time I would put steak in my mouth, like, I just felt like it was better than any antidepressant in the world. Like, that first time that steak touches your tongue, every time you stop eating it, then you eat it again, and it felt amazing. So I did that. And 3 weeks later, I'm sitting there eating my steak, and I'm going, wait a second. I haven't had any depression in a while. And I've been sleeping really well. And I haven't had any negative thoughts. And I feel great. Like, is this possible? Did it work for me? So I was really cautious, because I thought on keto, I had to have that too. But keto ended up failing me because I had, severe mania again. So I wasn't sure, but I was optimistic for the first time in forever. Real optimism, because I felt really good. And I said, okay, well, I explained it to my wife, and she said, okay, well, let's continue. I said, I'm going to try it for 3 months. 3 months. Everyone says that 3 months, if you don't feel the effects in 3 months, that's a good, like, average. Not 1 month, because 1 month is not enough to really adjust to anything, but 3 months, you should really start feeling good. So I did it for 3 full months, and I did it, on my own. I didn't have any coaching. I didn't have anyone else. I just bought the cheapest cuts of meat I could, because I was, still really poor. And I went and cooked them and ate them and felt great. And I just kept getting better and better. And at this point, before I started carnivore, I was walking most of the time with crutches or a leg brace, because I had so much pain. Just taking one wrong step, going 10 feet from the couch to the bathroom, I could injure myself, and I would be in a leg brace for like a month or 2 months at a time. It was just constant. It was chronic. And I stopped having pain. Like, I started carnivore in a leg brace and crutches. So I was like cooking, and trying to cook with my crutches, and it was just horrible. And then I go, 3 months later, like, no more pain, no more joint pain. Like, I felt better. I felt like I had a lot more energy and all these amazing changes. Now I hadn't lost weight, but I didn't go to carnivore for weight loss. Like, I went to carnivore because I was physically and mentally ill. That's what it was for. I didn't care about my weight at the time. And after going carnivore for 3 months, I really didn't care about my weight, because I felt so amazing. I definitely didn't gain weight. I didn't necessarily lose it, but I definitely didn't gain any. So I felt great. I started in May. In July, it's a summer, and we have an opportunity to go to take my kids to Disneyland. And I couldn't have imagined going to a park, let alone an amusement park, or, for the last 6 years. But I felt so good. I said, okay, let's go. And I hadn't walked like more than the circumference of my house in like 6 years. And now I'm going to go to this amusement park and walk all day, right? And I said, it might be hard, but worst comes to worst, I'll call an ambulance. I'll have them take me to the hotel. So I went, and it was incredible. Like, I had so much energy. I walked all day, and yeah, my feet hurt, just like anyone's feet would hurt after walking all day in an amusement park. But I mean, we walked all day, walked back to the hotel, and I was like, this is incredible. And I didn't eat all day either, because there wasn't a lot of options at Disneyland. I think we had, the only thing I could eat was the turkey leg. So we got a couple turkey legs, and we shared it with our kids. Yeah, the giant ones. But I got back to the hotel and I felt amazing. Like I survived. I didn't have crippling anxiety. I wasn't, constantly paranoid about people seeing me. I wasn't any of those things I felt all the time. I wasn't arguing with my wife. The stress of, doing something like that would trigger me and I would get really anxious. And I wasn't any of these things. I was just happy. I spent an amazing weekend with my family and we got to go, have a great time and everyone had fun and, no one was upset or depressed or sad, and it was just incredible. And so that's when I said, this is it. Like I wasn't telling anyone in my family, outside of my immediate family about what I was doing, and I just kept doing it. And I said, I'm going to see, 3 months. I've been manic for 3 months before, so this could just be mania, right? Maybe I just, whatever I'm eating is just causing me to be in a manic state. But I was sleeping well. I wasn't spending my family's money or trying to, I wasn't drinking. None of these things that I normally do in a manic state. I wasn't trying to self-medicate, So I was just, I was just very, very optimistic, but still cautious. And then you get to where I am today, 8 months later. No symptoms of mania, no symptoms of depression. I'm just healthy. I feel happy. I wake up every day and I am so grateful that I am healed from what I was before, that I'm not suffering like I was every single day of my life, for the last 20 years. I've never been this stable, never for 8 months straight. And am I still cautious? Of course. You can't go through what I went through and not be cautious. But seeing what I went through, and I knew what it was like to be manic. I knew what it was like, all the warning signs. And my wife knew as well. And she said, first warning sign, we stop. And I haven't had any. And that brings me to today.
That is such an amazing story. And your wife, oh my goodness, she deserves a medal. She is a saint, just like my husband. I was not diagnosed with bipolar. I was close. If I had to change more meds again, then they were probably going to give me that title. I was so drugged. I was on Zoloft for 10 years. Yeah, along with a bunch of other stuff too. My mom was also almost diagnosed with bipolar, super close, but we didn't get manic enough to be considered bipolar. I completely understand. And for anyone listening, you're not alone. We understand what it feels like to be stuck and trapped in your own head. And there is absolutely hope. And it's worth a try, if nothing else. The guilt that you feel once you come out of that depressive or that manic state is almost overwhelming. And to be able to handle that and deal with it and not let that crush you to the point of there's no coming back from that. That is one of the things that carnivore can help you do.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the healing of your brain, it's dealing with the after effects of what you've been through. Like you said, you accepted, okay, this is my disease. It's never going to get any better. That's a huge step in itself. But then you have to deal with the after effects. And for some people, that's what's too much. For me, that was one of my hardest issues to deal with, was the guilt that I felt after it happened. And I'd look back and see what I did. And then I'd beat myself up over it forever.
Yeah.
You just want to sleep. And I'm like, I don't want to be around anyone because I'm afraid I'm going to hurt you again.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again. And that you're not alone.
Yeah.
Like we understand, we've been there. And there is so much hope. There are so many people in this space, in the carnivore space, who have overcome mental illness. And there's some people who have to go, sweet friend of mine, Emily Pinton, she's raw carnivore right now because that is what her body processes the best, and only a cow from this one farm that she can handle. But she found what works for her, and she, just like you, has said, once you're free, it doesn't matter what you have to eat anymore. It's like, no, I will always do this. I will always eat like this because the freedom is absolutely worth it. And now your family is also I see pictures all the time of your girls. So what are they eating? Are they still keto, or have they come over to the dark side?
Well, they're definitely enjoying carnivore. Like, if they ask for vegetables or ask for anything, we usually try to accommodate them because, I didn't want to restrict them or make them feel bad about wanting stuff. But I just, when I went carnivore, I tried to give them better options and say, if you want, you can eat this. If you want some pasta, I'll make you some pasta. And in the beginning, they would eat a lot of steak and the pasta, but then they wouldn't feel so good with the pasta. And I would explain to them, well, one of the reasons why you don't necessarily feel good is because you have the same problem I had. You don't handle pasta very well, and you like eating it, but you're not really hungry for it. You're hungry for nutrients. So do you like steak? And they said, yeah, we like steak. And I said, well, why don't you try eating more steak next time? And so they slowly transition, and now they're pretty much 99% carnivore.
I love that. The kids here, we just recently tried adding a few extra things. I see the oranges behind you. It didn't go very well.
So we don't. That's why there's so many oranges. We don't touch them.
Yeah, no, it didn't. It doesn't go very well. We tried it, and so many people have told me, oh, well, you're going to hurt your kids, and it's dangerous for you to only feed them this. And it's like, yeah, I'm really going to have to disagree with you on that. And I'm the same as you. If my kids ask for vegetables or even fruit, I'll let them have it. And then we always talk about how they feel afterwards.
Well, to address that with kids, like my kids have a normal pediatrician.
Mhm.
And before we started carnivore or keto with them, they were both suffering. One was suffering from being borderline obese, and the other one was under eating. And this is on normal, healthy vegetables and rice and pasta and minimal meat. And now after going carnivore, first they went keto and they got tremendous health from keto, cutting out the sugars, cutting out the processed foods as much as possible. And now carnivore, they are just thriving. Like, they're so full of energy. They're so happy all the time. They don't have mood swings. They don't have they don't cry for no reason. They're just two extremely healthy, happy little girls. And their pediatrician agrees. She said, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it, because you're the one who was obese, she's healthy now. The one who was under eating, she's put on weight. And they were not under eating on a sad diet. They were eating tons of pasta, tons of rice. They were eating a lot of calories. It just wasn't helping them at all.
Sounds like they are terrible converters.
Yeah. And just like, and it makes sense. I was too.
Mm-hmm.
I was happy eating all these sausage and eggs and bacon and hamburgers. Like, I didn't ask for any of that other stuff.
Mm-mm.
And when that was taken away from me, that's when I was sad. And so I've let them decide. I said, you guys choose how you feel best. And they know that they feel best eating only steak. And sure, sometimes we go out to restaurants and places and I let them choose. But I always explain, well, remember what happens. And the other day we were on a road trip in Palm Springs, and they went to eat my youngest, she decided to have pancakes. I said, okay, that's fine. Just watch out what happens. Half an hour after we finished eating, she was crying on the ground of the hotel room. And she's like, I can't stop crying. Like, it was just immediate. And I said, this is why we don't buy these things. And she really seemed to understand that. She said, oh. And it was terrible for her. She hated crying. But she both, they had like no emotional control. As soon as they had some pancakes again. So they're just like, no, we're fine. The last time we went to a restaurant, my daughter got eggs Benedict with no muffins, just the eggs and the ham and the hollandaise sauce with an extra side of bacon and sausage, and she ate that. And my youngest, same, extra side of bacon and sausage, and ate all her meat. And they were just really, really happy. And afterwards, no crying, no emotional problems, just two very, very, very healthy, happy girls.
I love that they don't have to go through what you went through, because now they get to experience it in little tiny snippets and portions in a controlled environment where they are safe. And you're teaching them from a young age, this is what happens when we eat foods that our bodies don't like. And I hope that they remember that. Same thing with my kids. I hope that when they are on their own, they remember. And we'll let them. My youngest went to a birthday party and they had gluten-free cupcakes. And so I told her, okay, you can have, gluten-free cupcakes. It was in a candy store, for crying out loud.
Mhm.
And she felt okay afterwards, but not super great.
Yeah.
And it's like, sometimes with your kids, restricting them too much does not bode well, because then they want to swing too far the other direction when they're
Right.
on their own. And
And that's why I would never take away, want to take away their agency, their ability to make choices and decide. I want my children to make their own informed decisions. And so for me, it's really important that they understand the connection of what they understand my history. I'm very open with my kids about, what I went through when I was young and how it affected me, and why I think, it's entirely possible that I passed that trait on genetically to them. Whatever was causing me distress from eating rice and pasta and all these things would cause them the same harm. And so they understand that. And, they're not missing it. Like the other day, I made a meat pizza with just meat, hamburger as the base and cheese and pepperoni on top and Italian sausage. And my youngest, this is the one who, she would be the only one in the house would be like, oh, I miss pasta sometimes. But as soon as she would eat meat, she would forget about it. But she said to me, she said, Daddy, I don't miss pasta anymore. And she just wolfed down her pizza, and that was such an incredible moment for me to see her get to that place where she was just like, I love this. I love these foods I'm eating. I feel so great. I mean, the mornings at our house are super easy. My girls wake up on their own usually. We don't have to drag them out of bed. They're like, they wake up, they're like full of energy. Just jump out of bed and they get dressed, they eat their breakfast, which is usually some form of carnivore waffles with bacon or sausage. And they're just like, or sometimes I make them a little beef shashuka with just sauteed beef, and I crack some eggs in it and let it cook slowly so the eggs get a little runny. And they love it. They absolutely love it. They love hamburger in the morning. It's like their favorite thing. Whenever they have hamburger, they get excited. They're like, oh, we get to have hamburger. Okay, yay. It's like they're loving it. They love how they feel. And you look at their skin, on my Instagram, I posted a picture from a couple of years ago and now, and you just see the difference. This is the middle of winter, the same time, right? They were so pale back then, just sickly looking. And the picture of them, and they're eating pasta and a chicken bake at Costco. And you see them now eating scrambled eggs, and they just look like the epitome of health. Their skin color is rich and vibrant. They're not pale, and they're happy. You can see it in their face and their eyes. You can see in someone's eyes and face if they're eating well. You really can. If someone's not eating well, you see it on their face. And on these girls' faces, they are just two happy, healthy little girls.
That is such a beautiful picture, to see the difference in your own kids and teaching them that this could happen to you too. We do the same thing. My kids will ask me about, I have stretch marks on the back of my arms, and they'll ask me, what are these? Did you get cut? No, my skin just got stretched out because there was a lot of extra fat in there, and the skin takes a long time to go away. And they'll ask me, how do I not get that? And I'm like, don't eat junk.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple. Let's just stick to meat and eggs, things like that. So they have their own, and they love to make their own foods here. They'll ask us, one of them asked, can I have steak? Yep, let's go get it. So we go get it and put it on the cinder. Or taco meat is one of their really big ones, where they just eat
They
it in a
love-
bowl with cheese on top of it. And
And
so finding,
I think what makes, my kids really happy though, is they have their dad back. Even though I was there the last 6 years, I wasn't there. I was absent a lot in my own head and my own thoughts, just not able to smile, not able to play. And I'm there for them now 24/7. I take them to school. I couldn't walk. I take them to school now every day. I pick them up from school. I do all the shopping for our family. I take care of, so many more things that just before I couldn't even imagine. And that's, they get to see that firsthand. They know, that their father was sick.
Mhm.
And they know that, bipolar is often genetic. You don't get it just by yourself. It has to be, something in your family. There's often a connection in your family to getting it. And that was something I was always worried about for my kids, having kids even, was like, what's going to happen to them? I would pray that one day there would be a cure and they wouldn't have to suffer if they ended up becoming like me. And now I'm not worried. There's lots of things to worry about in this life, but that's not one of them anymore, because now they know and I know what we can do to not have those issues.
And that cure does not come in a capsule.
No.
We expect so many things from these little capsules, that they're going to fix everything. And I wonder how many people are being so harmed by their medications. Like you said, your doctor said, oh no, that's not this.
Well, so many. I mean, I was in a support group for 10 years here with lots of people who are bipolar and suffer from depression. And they all talk about cocktails, drug cocktails that their physician prescribes them, their psychiatrist prescribes them. And, oh, the cocktail's not working anymore, let's change it up. And in the meantime, they're having tremendous side effects, horrible side effects that most people can't even imagine. And that it really is, it's just needless suffering, because all these people are suffering, and there's a solution that's so simple. One of the drugs I was prescribed cost $1,500 a month for one drug.
Mhm.
I feed my entire family on $1,500 a month, on a family of 6. I never go beyond that.
Mhm.
This was one drug that the state was happy to pay for, that I was prescribed, that was not helping me at all. And yet, if I had took that same money and I just bought nutrient dense meat, I could have not only stopped suffering, but gotten healthier.
Yes, it's amazing to me how many people say that they can't afford a carnivore diet. And I say, you can't afford to not try.
That's the biggest excuse and the biggest lie people tell themselves.
Yeah.
It's not expensive. You can buy ground beef for maybe $1 or $2 a pound every day of the week. And you can eat that and be extremely happy and extremely healthy.
Yes.
When we started, that's what we ate a lot of, because we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't want to spend a lot of money, especially not knowing if this was going to work or not. So we ate a lot of ground beef, and ground beef's amazing. You sprinkle a little cheddar on it if you're not lactose intolerant, and it's the best meal in the world. And fry a couple eggs, put it on top. It's amazing. Like, nothing is better than when you're in a cold day, a bowl of ground beef, and everyone can eat that. And even if you go to fast food, people say, oh, I can't cook, I have to go to fast food. It costs like $1 to get a burger at a fast food place. When we go on a trip, or on a road trip, or a day trip, we go to Carl's Jr. and get hamburgers for $1, just the meat. They don't charge you the $6 for the whole burger. They just charge you for the patty. We get like 10 patties for like $12. And they're satisfying and everyone loves them. And just like, Kelly Hogan, we call them meat cookies.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely worth it. And most people can't afford not to try.
Exactly. I suffered 20 years, all the lost income because I could never work more than part-time. How much money did I lose by eating those kind of foods?
And the medications that people are spending their money on now, the insulin.
Yeah.
I mean, all of these medications, yes, they cost money. Just think, if you could get off of those medications, reduce those medications to some amount, then you are saving money. I don't know a single person. One lady in our group, she talked about she saved $400 and some odd dollars on lotion alone.
Yes.
In 1 year, she saved $400 on lotion because eating carnivore is healing her from the inside out and she doesn't need it anymore.
Yes.
So the amount that it affects your life and changes your expenses, it's mind-boggling. And if you don't make room for it now and you don't pay for it now, you will pay for it later.
Or you're already paying for it. You just don't even know.
Yeah.
I really believe that most people are sick to a certain degree. So they're suffering. Either you see so many like food bloggers who are dealing with terrible anxiety, who just cry or have all these fears, all this anxiety they suffer from chronically. And you see what they do. They go out and they eat all these delicious foods that are really unhealthy for you, tons of seed oils, tons of pasta, tons of fries. And they don't understand because no one's explained to them that food is making you sick. And if you just stop, you'll feel so much better. But no one explains this.
No, they don't. There's no money in fixing people and healing them. What's funny,
There's a lot of money in keeping people sick.
That's very true.
Prescribing them drugs.
I'm actually sick for the first time in 4 years because I did a little experiment. I brought carbs back in. I brought some fruit back in and some honey back in. Oh my goodness. I don't think you could pay me to eat another carb for the rest of my life. And the way that it made my brain, I'm so glad I did it though, because I can tell people what it did. Yeah. It made my brain gummy again. I couldn't think about how to put two words together to form a sentence.
Yeah.
And I can't type anything out. I mean, I would just sit there and go, it was so horrible. And I thought, well, it's natural sugar. It should be okay. And it was the honey from Wisconsin, locally, no corn syrup honey. It's the bees that are eating off of the clover or whatever it is. It didn't matter. It did not matter what it was. So please learn from my example and my stuffy nose. Don't do it. It's not worth it because it didn't bring health. And it was, a grapefruit. So really good vitamin C and all. It's a lie. It's all a lie.
When I started carnivore, I got sometimes those cravings, like, oh, I need to eat some sugar or something. And, the fix was simple. Just eat more meat and fat. And once I did that, not only did I, start losing, like weight, at least inches around my waist, I don't fill out my clothes as much anymore, none of those things, but I have zero cravings. If you have a sugar craving, it's usually because you're not eating enough, and specifically fat. It was hard for me to eat fat. Now I eat about a stick of Kerrygold butter a day. But when I started, like I would have like 2 tablespoons and go like, oh, look, I'm eating butter. Like, wow, that wasn't enough. But once I really upped my animal fats and choosing really fatty steaks, and one of my favorites that's cheapest, you get it for like $4 a pound, is like untrimmed tri-tip. Oh, I slice that up like steaks and I cook it. And it has this amazing fat ring around the top. And when you go buy that trim tri-tip at like any place, they scrape all that fat off. Don't do it. And it costs more money. It's like, don't do it. Buy the cheap stuff. $4 a pound. And you can eat tri-tip, which is amazing as steaks. You cook it just like any other steak. It costs next to nothing. And you're getting a ton of fat. You're saving money on butter because it's got so much fat.
Yeah. I love finding the deals, shop the deals, look around. I will have Jules give me the link and I will put it down below in the description, but there's an app that you can get to find local deals in your area. You get this app, put it in there. It'll tell you who's got the cheapest, beef.
mygrocerydeals.com. Yeah.
Yes. So use that. And I always tell people, even the cheapest, crappiest meat and eggs from the grocery store is going to be 1,000 times healthier for you.
And it's going to taste amazing.
Yeah. You have to trust the process. And for you, 3 weeks, you notice significant improvements in 3 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, I don't sleep. I sleep perfectly now. I don't need to, I close my eyes. That was something throughout my childhood. I always had problems sleeping. I could never fall asleep. My mind would be too active at night. For me, it was a chronic condition. I just never could fall to sleep easily. Now I lay in bed and before I can even turn my podcast on, I'm asleep. And I wake up, I'm like, oh, wow, okay. And I sleep solidly 6-7 hours every night. And I wake up like I just drank a gallon of coffee. I have so much energy every morning. Like I go to bed at 9, I wake up at 3 or 4, and I'm full of energy. So what do? Well, I go read. I just started going back to the gym this week. Like after 6 years of not being able to exercise or do anything, I'm going to the gym 5 days a week, and I love it. Like I just have all this energy. I got to use it for something. Right? What am I'm bored if I'm not doing something. So I started finding things to do. I started shopping more. I started, doing the cooking, making breakfast for my family. Like I just have all this energy. I'm not waiting to get my first cup of coffee in the morning. If I even drink coffee, I drink decaf and I drink it at, not every day. It's just when I'm with someone or if someone wants to have something, but I just have so much energy when I wake up. It's just incredible. I've never had that feeling before, ever. I've never slept so well.
And I love all the pictures that you post in the network. Jules has food porn. That's what it is. He will post the most amazing pictures of food. And everyone's like, oh, I need to. So I think I'm going to have Jules start, putting all of his recipes in there for people to see. It's totally possible.
Yes.
I loved your before and after pictures of the chicken. He shows all this raw chicken and then the cooked chicken, the grilled chicken. Oh my gosh. I actually laughed out loud on that one. I was like, this is brilliant. So it has been incredible talking with you and hearing your story. And I hope that this gives hope to someone and that someone who needs to hear it finds this episode so that they can pass it on to maybe a family member who needs to hear this. But Jules, if anyone wants to get in touch with you for advice or just encouragement, how can they find you?
Oh, you can find me on Instagram. That's where I'm most active at Daddy Carnivore. One word, also on Twitter. And, I just want to say, for everyone who's out there, anyone who's been suffering or is suffering or has suffered like I have, there is a lot of hope. I didn't have hope for the longest time. I thought I was never going to get better. And I accepted my fate that this was it. This was my life. And, now I have a brand new life. I have a new, like the world, the possibilities are absolutely limitless. And I'm so excited, to share what I know with others. And, there's even a new field of study that's starting now, actually, called nutritional psychology. And it focuses on this. What causes in our diet are causing all these problems. And they think by 2027, it's going to be an actual degree where people can go and get a title as a nutritional psychologist, because this is such an important area of study. And I hope to be one of the, first in that class, because, now I can go back to school.
Yeah.
I can study again. I can learn again. I can live again, something I couldn't do for so long. And I'm so excited, and I don't want to wait.
The more that we go to our doctors and tell them, look, no, this changed my life, it did work, the more they hear about it, the more they go, maybe there's something really to this. It's not just one crazy patient, it's 15.
And we need more people in academia to change this, to do the research, become a nutritional psychologist, and help those who are suffering from medications and be advocates for them to say, this needs to stop. We can't have people suffering and drug companies making a lot of money off of the suffering of others. That's not okay. We can help them, but we got to change the way we approach treatment.
It really is bordering on medical malpractice.
Absolutely.
The more you learn, the more you understand the way that our brains work, the more you go, it's completely unnecessary. And they need to listen, they need to stop, and they need to listen.
Yeah.
So fantastic talk. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for showing me the California sunshine.
Yes, sorry, I'm sure it was coming in and out, but I'm glad to share it with you. And
Yeah.
it was helpful.
I miss it a little bit, especially right now. It's like
I can
9
imagine.
degrees.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy. It was an absolute pleasure.
Just a couple of bruised up souls that believe